March 2021, McAllen, Texas. Well, we start off the month with the RV windshield guys coming back to fix the many leaks in the windshield after they just replaced it 2 months ago. All is well, no more leaks. Hopefully, it stays that way. Well, the windshield got fixed, but just to keep things well balanced, the refrigerator broke. No problem. We called Samsung, and although it is out of warranty, Samsung did find an authorized technician in our area who came by and fixed it. These fridge guys weren't keen on working inside of an RV, so I saved myself about $200 by doing all the prep works so that when they showed up, all they had to do was replace the components, and now I have a working refrigerator and 200 extra bucks in my wallet. Everything went well. And now, with most of the maintenance out of the way, it's time to go out and have some fun with friends. Craig and Susan joined us on about a 6-mile hike through the Santa Ana Nature Preserve. As we hiked, we found this old cemetery inside the nature preserve. Nobody has used this cemetery since the mid-1800s. As we continued our hike, we found that this nature preserve had several observation towers with suspension bridges linking them. It was a long climb and it was hot outside that day, but the view at the top was worth the climb. We climbed each of the towers and every one of them gave us a different perspective of the area around us. What amazed me about this conservation area is how quickly the scenery around you changed as you hiked through this preserve. Yes, most of it is mesquite scrubland, but then you find walkways that take you over marshland, and you go just a little bit further, and you're in a thin forest with the trees covered with Spanish moss. Really pretty. Go just a little bit further, and you're at the edge of a lake, looking across it and the grasslands beyond. We hiked a lot of miles through this park and had a great time doing it. But what I was really looking forward to was our next destination. This time we were headed back to SpaceX down at Boca Chica Beach. For those of you that watched our previous videos, you'll know that we went down to South Padre Island back in January to watch SpaceX launch Starship. And you'll also know that that Starship came down and blew up as soon as it hit the ground. You'll also know that we came down here back in February and got some great pictures of Starship SN-10 sitting on the launch pad getting ready to blast off. So a few days after we saw SN-10 sitting on the launch pad, it did blast off. And the Starship did land. Although the landing was a little bit hard, it did land. And this is the very first time that SpaceX successfully landed one of their rockets. Now, successfully is one of those words that is somewhat questionable. Because although the rocket did land, and it stayed on the pad, for 7 minutes, it did eventually blow up because the landing was a little bit hard. So on the one hand, it landed. On the other hand, it still blew up. Well, anyway, since we were here last month and we got some beautiful pictures of Starship on the launch pad getting ready to launch, I figured why not come back and get a few more pictures of Starship SN-10 on the landing pad. So that's what we're doing here. We're here to see Starship SN-10 that successfully landed on the launch pad at the SpaceX facility in Boca Chica, Texas. The SpaceX facility is always busy. Right now, they're getting ready to get SN-11 on the launch pad for the next launch. It still amazes me how close you can actually get. Those are the assembly buildings. That's where Starship is actually built, and it's like 50 yards off the road. Just amazing that you can get this close. The actual launch pad is about a mile down this very road, And when they need to take the rocket that's in the assembly building off to the left, they actually drive it down this very road to get it to the launch pad. And it's a heavy rocket, so, they're doing a lot of road construction to make it easier to get that rocket down to the launch pad. SN11, that's currently in the assembly building, is going to be the last Starship prototype that SpaceX plans to launch for a while. Now they're changing their priorities and start working on the booster that's going to take that Starship and put it up in space. And there it is, down there on the right. You can see the launch pad sitting right next to that big crane. That crane is what's going to pick up Starship and set it on the launch pad. All of the stuff you see to the left, that's the fuel farm. Those big tanks hold liquid oxygen and liquid methane because that is the fuel for Starship. That little silver thing alongside the road just ahead of us? Well, that's Starhopper. That is the first prototype that actually took off and landed. It's amazing to see how that little thing has grown and become what is now the Starship prototype, but also how much farther Starship has to go before it's actually a working rocket. And there it is, Starship SN10 on the landing pad, not more than 20 yards off the road. I gotta say, it has looked better. But hey, let's not forget, this was a successful landing. So now we're just going to drive a little further down the road and park the car, walk back, and get a better look at what's going on. So again, the rocket landed successfully, but 7 minutes later, the fuel tanks blew and it launched it about 100 feet up in the air. The rocket tilted and came down nose first. That's one of the rocket engines. And that is the cowling that used to surround 3 rocket engines that the Starship uses to fly. You can still see one of the 4 winglets that the rocket uses to control its descent as it's coming down for a successful landing. With both the launch pad and the landing pad being as close to the road as they are, it's easy to understand why this road is always closed during a launch and a landing. Being this close to the road, though, makes it very easy for SpaceX to drive their Starship from the assembly area to the launch pad, and from the landing pad back to the assembly area. And now that we've had a chance to look around, it's time to do some hiking along the beach and the sand dunes that surround the complex. There are some neat little trails that take you through the dunes alongside the complex. And although you can't go too far south because, Mexico is like 2 miles down the road, you can certainly hike a lot of miles north if you feel like walking. And again, some nice shots of the space complex from the top of one of the taller dunes. I'll tell you, you can get a pretty good workout going up and down some of these dunes. They're steep, and the sand slips out from under you, and there's all sorts of things that just want to bite you and stick you. After all, this is Texas. But we did get back to the beach, and after that hiking, we decided to take a little bit of a rest and just kind of hung around there for a while watching this guy fish. He didn't catch anything at all while we were there, but we did talk to him a little bit, and he actually did catch several fish. And that was all the rest we needed, because it was time to go back to the dunes and make our way back to the car. And after another couple of miles of hiking, we finally found our way out of the dune and made it back to the car. Time for the drive back to the RV park. We only have about 50 miles or so to get there, and usually it doesn't take us much more than about an hour and 15 minutes, depending on traffic. And we're enjoying taking one last look at the SpaceX launch facilities, because we won't be coming this way again for a lot of years. I really wonder just how much this place is going to change. I mean, it's changed a lot just in the 3 months that we've been here. This whole area to the left of us just started getting built since we've been here, and that's going to be the launch complex for the booster rocket and eventually for the entire Starship. It's going to be cool. I think if I can, we're going to try to come back here in maybe 3 or 4 years just to take a look at how things have changed. So seeing the SpaceX launch facility, watching one of their rockets launch, seeing another one after it's landed, and just looking at everything they're doing out here has definitely been one of the highlights of this trip. We've been here for about 3 months now. It's a good place to come and spend the winter because it's not as cold down here as it is throughout most of the rest of the country. But it's definitely time to move on. These 3 months have been interesting, although not without their complications. While here, we had to replace a windshield and then have it fixed. Our refrigerator busted and also needed to get fixed. We had the back brakes and drums on the RV replaced, but couldn't find anybody to actually do the front brakes, so that's still to come. And finally, we had the slide toppers replaced. After all, they were nearly 4 years old, and it was time for them to be replaced. But on that score, we got a really good deal down here, as labor is not as expensive as it is in other parts of the country, so that was a really good thing. So these 3 months have been really busy, and they've gone by fast. We've been kept busy with things that we've had to do, and busy with things that we just wanted to do. And so the time just flew by. On the COVID front, things down here were far worse than they were anywhere else that we've been during all of last year. So the end of 2020 certainly didn't put an end to the pandemic, But then again, we didn't think it would. But on the upside, vaccines are available, and this month, Janet and I got ours. Our first vaccine is in, only one more to go, and that's going to happen next month. So with that, our time at McAllen, Texas has come to an end, and it's time for us to move on. We're still in Texas, and we will be for a while, but this is where our 2021 year really starts. So let the travels begin, and we'll see you at our next stop.